Alright, so I'll be discussing what I felt worked and what didn't work in the final episode of Star Wars Resistance: The Escape. I'll be assuming that if you're watching this video, you've already seen the episode. I'll also be discussing the three most important themes to the final episode, and especially its role in tying up the final season of Star Wars Resistance. So first of all, the mouse droid was pretty interesting. Obviously, there's no more B1 or B2 battle droids used or seen in Star Wars Resistance, and it's kind of unfortunate. Although I think it's very interesting that the staff creating the show thought to include all the mechanical knowledge that was learned up until season two, and so I think it was interesting that Niku fixed up the battle droids. He even used the B1 battle droid to command the B2 battle droids, which was very interesting. Um, I thought it was interesting that Tam relays the code to the Colossus using the mouse droid, and also that Kaz helps to fix the fireball. And all of these seems sort of create a sense of growth that's specific to each character. And the Star Wars Resistance, uh, if it had included more markers of progress, I believe the TV show would have been 100 times better to watch. Season 2 really touched on the importance of teamwork and cooperation. The best arc for this theme was the Aces' journey. So at the start, the Aces were pretty uncoordinated and ill-suited towards each other. Working together was very painful for them, but midway through the season, Hype Phazon himself starts to begin to help others out. And for the benefit of the entire Colossus, they start to sacrifice their own glory, mainly Hype Phazon. Yeager also tries to lead them and teach them certain lessons, which they end up learning by the end of Season 2. Season 2 of Star Wars Resistance, especially in The Escape, is just really indicative of the larger teamwork and cooperation theme, and that the Aces were uncoordinated at the start, but towards the end, and especially in The Escape, are an extremely well-oiled machine that's able and capable of taking down a much larger threat and a larger foe because they're united by a common goal. And the common goal is generally throughout the series to help the Colossus or to strive for the benefit of all the beings on the Colossus. Whereas the First Order has very few goals that are beneficial towards other people. Sometimes they delude themselves into thinking that their goals are helpful, but for the most part, their ends and their goals, their objectives are all aimed towards destroying the lives of other people. Um, and Tam begins to learn this as well, in the sense that common duty for the Colossus is extremely different than a shared duty or sense of purpose for the First Order. The First Order mainly just focuses on crushing anyone that would disagree with them, sort of like a tyrant mindset. And Tam, I don't think, has that sort of ethic. She doesn't want to do that. And the Colossus, while they're not all sided with the Resistance, they're emblematic of the Resistance um, more generally because the Resistance fights for freedom and more along the lines of the First Order is what they're fighting against because the First Order represents tyranny. And the Fractured Team Fireball is interesting to me at least because even though Tam is separated, she becomes probably a better member of Team Fireball by learning what it means to be part of a team, and a good team at that. And Team Colossus as well is just something that's kind of echoed and restated throughout the show that I think that Tam sort of starts to realize, like again, what it means to be part of a team and a team that's striving towards something good, rather than just having a goal to kill and crush and murder and maim and destroy everything in your path like the First Order. Kind of interesting as well that the Colossus, especially in the defense part of the escape, is like the Star Wars equivalent of Home Alone in the sense that they kind of utilize guerrilla warfare and battle tactics where anyone can sort of triumph. Um, and I find that these were probably the greatest scenes in the escape where they use like commonplace objects to kind of take over and prevent really just prevent the First Order from taking over the Colossus. And I feel like these efforts and these scenes are definitely the best. It's kind of what makes it sort of like a David and Goliath standoff, where they're kind of using custodial custodial supplies to take down First Order troopers. And this for me was the best aspect of Star Wars Rebels, in that each episode the Empire kept getting stronger and the odds were more insurmountable, and yet the Rebels uh, still overcome and managed to win. Um, I think if the show had more of this, Star Wars Resistance would have been a lot better and more palatable. I think a lot of the problem with Star Wars Resistance is that the pacing is just wrong, and the pacing doesn't really stay consistent. And so for that reason, it's just hard to kind of follow along and stay interested. Um, so with Team Colossus, another big theme just seems to be the forgiveness aspect. So, like when Tam returns, Niku is extremely willing to forgive Tam, and he kind of says that all people make mistakes, um, and this is sort of like emblematic of a larger theme as well. And just that forgiveness is kind of what Tam needs, or she starts to recognize that in a family unit, forgiveness is very important. And moreover, Kylo Ren's demonstration is really interesting and cool, um, in that when he forces people to point guns at each other from being like millions of miles away, it's like a really cool improvement on the Force joke, and Darth Vader would definitely have been proud of this display. Although Kylo Ren is like the complete opposite of forgiveness. I mean, instead of forgiving someone or acknowledging that there could be work done, he just creates a terrible work environment. And so instead of like forgiving or trying to get over something or getting past an issue, the First Order quite literally threatens or coerces someone into doing something, or even murders them or brings about their murder, um, very much unnecessarily for a goal that's very harsh. Whereas the residents of the Colossus and, moreover, the resistance at large does not do this. They don't use extremely harsh tactics to bring about a goal, which is another reason why Tam defects. The last sort of theme is more about the family unit. So the Team Colossus aspect is really just the whole family, and is more emblematic of why the Resistance is worth fighting for, and that the whole of the show is basically just that family always finds a way, and the theme is that, like, the contrast to the Resistance and to the Colossus is that the First Order pretty much never has a chance because they don't have a common ground. They connive and kill and try and hurt each other in order to accomplish their goals. They they build an oppressive regime not based on common respect and trust, but mainly just on killing. And so that's never a family. It's sort of a house that can never stand because they're not unified. And so those are the three themes: cooperation, forgiveness, and family. And kind of the perfect union of these is kind of like if cooperation and forgiveness are both present, like say in the Colossus. I think kind of what happens is you start to get a sense of a family atmosphere, which Tam craves, and I think when she starts to realize um, in the escape is that that can never be the case with the First Order as it stands, because people are always afraid and they're always going to try and stab each other in the back so they can live maybe 5 more minutes. It doesn't matter what happens or what has to happen if such and such can get murdered so that, Agent Turney can live. Um, the conditions are just not conducive to someone living long or even maintaining a conscience at all. So now I'm just going to go into sort of the character growth and just assess as a whole why the series kind of lagged a little bit. So I feel like the only four characters that really grew were Doza, Niku, Tam, and Hype-Phazon. Doza grew because of his family and proximity to his literal family, um, Vanessa and Tora Doza. The them all being together kind of were the means by which Doza sort of grew, and you started to see more of a character aspect to him. You start to see more scenes where he kind of has authoritative roles. In season one, he just sort of orders people around, but in season two, he's making bigger decisions. He's exiling people. He's making sure that people have to live. It's more down to earth. There's more character growth because of the necessity that he does things. Same thing with Niku. Very, very similar. It's just that Niku in season one is just sort of flat. But in season two, Niku uses a lot of the skills that we know that he has, such as like mechanics. He reprograms the B1 battle droid to sort of like um, command all the other B2s, and because of that, it's like Niku grows quite a bit by using the skills that he has. You start to see a different side to Niku. He's like upset about Tam, but he's trying to be accepting to all sorts of different people. You start to see more depth to the character. And Tam, of course, kind of starts the season out very ready to be a first order officer, but sort of goes through a recognition of understanding that the ethics that the first order preaches are not her own, and that because they have a polemic difference, um, Tam can never stay in the first order, and so she defects. And right, that's what's seen in the escape. In High Phazon too, I feel like there's almost a polemic shift. I mean, it's almost a 180 you see, because High Phazon starts sort of as like a super arrogant, prideful person, but ends sort of as a tempered personality, someone that's willing to work with other people and willing to admit their faults and willing to improve and grow over time. Hype Phazon almost changes more than any of the other characters, I feel. But these four characters are, for me, a great outlier in the sense that the majority of the characters, like the pirates, the Force sensitive children, Mika Gray, Kylo Ren, Commander Pyre, Agent Tyranny, Yeager, Kaz, Sonara, quite a few characters are just not, they don't grow much. Or several characters we don't even see again. And I just, because of that, I think for the most part, the show is just undeveloped. The characters aren't growing, the character growth is incomplete. And I think the problem is that season two um, was kind of set up to be a precursor to a season three or a season four, and in which a lot of the characters would have grown, and there would have been growth, and there would have been a more stable ending. I think, for example, like the show could have really improved with a tie-in with the Rise of Skywalker, and I think that the Colossus could have kind of been guided along by some reference to the films, because even something small like a transmission from Lando or Palpatine could have sort of clarified where the Colossus stands in reference to the final Skywalker film. But without that, it's just kind of an open plot point, and it's just something that doesn't help um, to unify the show. It doesn't help to make the show better. And I think just some things I would have liked to see more of is like Sonara and what happens to Mika Gray and the Force sensitive children. Like if they ever get taught to use the Force, or if something like that ever really does happen. It's just interesting and it's unanswered. Um, Although there are some things too. I mean, I think Yeager in The Escape, while he was a pretty flat character, he's lacking somewhat in emotional depth, was just an extremely prodigious fighter and very accurate. Every time he shot, just about he took down a first order trooper. Um, in The Escape, he handily overcame every obstacle, and I would just like to see him on his in his prime on Jakku, doing what he does best, which is killing bad guys, pretty much. I also think that CB, the droid, was definitely the MVP in the episode. He literally saved Kaz, and he's kind of the saving grace of the show in the sense that he kind of brings a different sort of life to the show, sort of like Chopper did in Star Wars Rebels. Um, but he sort of seems as like an outlier for the show in the sense that a lot of the life and vitality of the show was just in CB or just in Niku for a particular episode. Um, I think there's got to be more there, or it just ends up being like a one-legged show, and you're just kind of entirely relying on CB to carry an episode or Nico to carry an episode because I can only take so much Kaz, and seeing as that's one of the main complaints of the show is that Kaz just stumbles along and is really clumsy. I think in the future maybe we could do with less of that and more of CB type characters. Anyway, if you disagree with something I said or you have sort of a critique or you have another theme that you found that was interesting, please don't hesitate to share it below. Thank you for watching and stay fantastic.